Did you know that a lot of self-employed people and freelancers don't survive 1 year, never mind 5? That's crazy. And that the very freedom that you chase as someone who's being self-employed is actually the one that's sabotaging your success. And you know that feeling where you're unmotivated, stressed, you have feelings of anxiety, you feel a little bit chaotic. And even when you reach a goal or you land a client, that joy that you feel, it fades pretty quickly and you feel like you're back on this crazy hamster wheel. Well, I'm going to share why this happens and how to fix it. But the really messed up thing is that the reason you probably became someone who was self-employed and a freelancer is probably the main thing that's actually sabotaging your success. And I'm going to explain the psychology behind that in a minute. Because if I'm honest, sometimes being self-employed, being freelance, having a small business, it actually gets you questioning whether you're going to survive or even if you're made for this kind of work. But the truth is that actually you've fallen into what I like to call the freelancing trap. It's where you wanted to be self-employed to escape the rat race, but now you're running your own personal hamster wheel and you're the one cracking the whip. So by the end of this video, you'll understand why you're stuck in this freelancing trap and the 3 specific systems to fix it. After 25 years of being self-employed, I can't tell you how many times I have felt completely lost and unmotivated and have really struggled and had to crash and revive myself so many times to the point where I've thought about just throwing in the towel and getting a 9 to 5. But here's what I couldn't understand was that I felt like I was working all hours, really, really hard, literally all hours a day, but I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I just couldn't figure it out. And I started questioning everything. My ability to manage myself, my skills, whether I was actually even cut out for this kind of lifestyle. The loneliness and lack of motivation really started to become quite crushing. Everything shifted once I learned that our brains aren't actually wired for the self-employment environment. And this clicked because I realized why my goals were failing and why it constantly felt like everything was always out of reach and really difficult no matter the hours I kept putting in. And once I realized how to fix the situation and how to work with my brain rather than against its natural components, I was able to build a business and a life that I genuinely loved. So in this video, we're going to cover 3 things. First, why structure and routine are a requirement if you want to get ahead. Second, why motivation crashes without feedback and how to rebuild it. And thirdly, the simple system to set goals that align with your values and how to actually stick to them. When I ask my clients why they wanted to become a freelancer or self-employed, the first thing they always say is that they wanted freedom. And I'm like, freedom to do what exactly? And that is to pick your own hours, to have autonomy, to choose the jobs that you want to do, to not be micromanaged, to have no one breathing down your neck. Basically not to have the 9 to 5 constrictions and office politics. And then you become one and you're like, wait, why can't I get anything done? And it's now 2 p.m. and my brain feels like complete mush and I'm so overwhelmed. For example, I had a client that was starting work at different times every day and wondering why she felt completely scattered. So the best thing that we could do was implement a system which was same time, same place, which then helped to gain direction and focus. And because of that, they were able to finish their projects 40% faster and pitch to new clients because they knew they had a routine and a structure for the same thing every day. I know it sounds mundane, but it's the only way to stay on top of what you're doing. Because you see, here's that messed up psychology bit that I mentioned earlier. The absence of structure is actually what's causing you to have these mini meltdowns because you have no plan. And your brain likes a plan. So when you wake up at 10 a.m. and you're having, let's say, a quiet month or week, you have no work, you have no plan, and you have no one directing you on what to do next and where to go to get you to the place that you want to be, that's when you start having a mini meltdown and worrying about what it is you're doing, and a lot of self-doubt can start seeping in. Because without these external building blocks of structure and planning, it gets easier and easier to neglect even the basics of self-care and definitely the basics of your business. So therefore, you just kind of get lost in your day, kind of doing things, but actually not taking any real action. It's a bit like you're doing activities, you're doing stuff, but you're not actually doing anything that's moving you forward. The big qualifying needle movers, because you don't really know what to do. You see, in a traditional workplace, there are people that are basically managing a lot of the self-management tasks for you, such as your working hours, scheduling projects, giving you deadlines, and all this basically reduces that cognitive load from you. But if you've picked the road of being self-employed, well, my friend, unfortunately, that falls all on you. And the brain strain from self-management, that actually is a real issue. So when you doubt yourself because you're feeling exhausted, or you're stressed and you have feelings of anxiety, you actually have reasons to feel that way. And before you start beating yourself up thinking that you need to have more willpower and more discipline, here's the reason why just being more disciplined is actually terrible advice. Because being self-employed is actually physically, mentally exhausting. You see, when you're constantly switching tasks while worrying about clients, income, taxes, bills, and then you also have no routine to speak of, and you're wondering when your next paycheck's coming in, and you're feeling quite isolated and alone, this is all really draining. And no matter how much discipline that you put into the arena, you've still got this constant task switching, which you don't have in a traditional working environment. For example, I had a client, Sarah, who was a graphic designer, and she was working 7 hours a day, but only billing for 4. And the reason being was because for 3 hours in the morning, she basically was spending her time thinking about which job she was going to work on first. So then she felt guilty about billing for those hours. So once we kind of put in a simple system for her Monday planning routine, she didn't feel guilty for her hours anymore and was able to bill accordingly. Now, the issue is, as someone who is self-employed, you're making a million decisions every day, and then you're also questioning those decisions that you've made because you have no one in your team right there and then to support you and direct you, keeping you accountable or even validating your ideas. And that becomes physically and mentally exhausting. And when you are that exhausted and feel drained, your motivation starts to decline. So what you do instead is that you go to the most easiest thing, which will give you dopamine hits, which is social media. And that's why you'll be scrolling on social media or scrolling online, because you're trying to get back those dopamine hits that help you feel a bit more motivated again. Quick question, drop me a comment if any of that resonates with you. If you feel like you're working in isolation and you have no one to bounce off and that makes you feel a little bit demotivated. You see, working alone all the time has its own set of challenges. You really have no one to bounce off, which means that you have no one to help you direct your ideas. You have no one to provide you with feedback, and you have no one validating you, which means no one's there to tell you if you're heading in the right direction. Therefore, there's no one around to share your mini wins. So when times do get tough, those mini wins are the things that actually keep you motivated. This pain of social isolation is akin to actual physical pain. So when you're feeling lonely or when you get rejected, we've all been there. It physically manifests in your body, spiking your cortisol levels and your nervous system. So whenever you're starting to feel a little bit down, a little bit depressed, and a little bit low, that's your sign to go out. That's your sign to go find a co-working space, to meet up with a friend, to collaborate with each other, and to work together in a social environment. But listen, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and here's what actually works. I'm going to share my exact system that supported me through my freelancing self-employed career. But before I do that, I just want to explain to you why why mainstream goal setting doesn't work for people who are self-employed. Here's what's really messed up about goal setting when you're working for yourself versus that you're working in a traditional working environment or working for somebody else. You see, when you're working in a traditional environment, someone else basically kind of sets your goals for you. You have sales targets, you have deadlines, you have holidays booked in. It kind of sucks, but at least you know it's clear and you have steps to reach. You have an easy directional path to follow. But when you're a self-employed person and you're freelancing, you have to set your own goals, which sounds amazing because you're like freedom, autonomy, great. It sounds great until you realize you've got to figure out, what does success actually mean and how do you get there and what time scale are you going to give yourself to reach these kind of goals in an ever-changing environment. See, ideally, your goals should come from stuff that actually means something to you. Growing as a person, having control over what you're doing meaningful work. But here's the problem: when you're self-employed and freelancing and you've got a small business, you have bills to pay. But you end up chasing money goals over anything else because you have to survive, but deep down, they don't feed your soul. Well, for some people, they might. It's this weird conflict where financial pressure actually becomes your priority, and all your other goals that were meant to be aligned with your values, they seem to go out the window. But it generally happens if you haven't got any plans or structure in place, so that you have to focus solely on earning that income and nothing more. And it's probably the reason why you never wanted a 9-to-5 in the first place, because you wanted to choose your own jobs and have that autonomy. But if you don't have any structure and systems in place to aid you to consistently stay motivated, then all you end up doing is chasing paycheck after paycheck and trying to find clients, because you don't know how much you want to earn, why you want to earn it, what your daily routine should be, how to find those clients and stay on top of that client acquisition. But here's the thing, there are practical solutions and they're not as hard as you think. So take a deep breath, because you've got this. So let's start with system 1, and it's called decision automation. Your brain is basically making a million tiny decisions throughout the day. So by the afternoon, your willpower and your brain is basically shot. So what actually works is taking all those micro decisions off your plate and creating a fixed routine. Scheduling your breaks at the same time, scheduling when you're going to finish work unless you have a deadline, scheduling when you're going to have lunch, scheduling when you're going to go to the gym. And always at the end of the day, write down what you're going to do first thing the next day, so that you don't have to make those decisions as soon as you wake up. This way, you're not burning brain power on the really small micro things that don't really matter. You can focus on the major things that move you forward in your business. And if you need to, put it in a calendar and set an alarm. Now, the second system is having validation building, because here's the truth. When you're self-employed, you really do lose all that social connection and social proof that help you validate yourself and move yourself forward. And without this kind of feedback loop, this kind of validation, you end up thinking that everything you're doing doesn't really hold a lot of meaning, because no one is with you cheering you on. And it starts to feel like nothing you're doing matters. Because social connection, that actually keeps your brain happy. That drops in dopamine and serotonin and gives you those bursts of micro energy. Even those quick chats and those little drinks at lunch, they're the things that motivate you to keep moving forward. So how do you create that for yourself? Well, you've got to build this back into your life on purpose, and you've got to create accountability buddies. And you can either do this by joining a co-working space, you can get a coach, you can partner up with a few people that are in the same career space as you, and as a group, go meet once a week in a co-working space. Speak amongst your peers and your friends, tell them how good they're doing, ask them to look at your work, think of ideas that you can discuss together, collaborate on projects together. You really do need that back and forth with your peers and your friends when you're self-employed. Because the truth is, your brain needs these reward signals to stay motivated, to feel like what you've done is of value. For example, when we create videos and you give people thumbs up or you comment, that is a way that we get that external validation for the work that we're doing. And that's why the people who've made these kind of softwares have put things like this in place. On one hand, it's good because it provides you with that feedback and that validation and that positive motivation. But on the other hand, when it comes to things like social media, if you're not careful, it also then creates these huge dopamine hits, which then can distract you from the thing that you're doing that might not be giving you the motivation and the feedback that you need. So being aware of that is definitely priority as someone who is self-employed. Now, system 3 is goal alignment. And I love goals and I've had them throughout my whole life. But this is where it gets a bit strange, because your brain's actually designed to enjoy the chase of the goal, not the actual achievement. So whenever you've accomplished your income target or had finished a project, you kind of feel a little bit deflated because it was the chase that was keeping you energized. And now that you've hit it, you will revert back to this baseline of happiness. It's totally normal to feel kind of a little bit empty instead of celebrating, but it also can feel a little bit demotivating when you don't understand what's actually happening. And the fix for this is stop setting massive goals that are really difficult to reach and really far in the future. For example, setting a goal where I'm going to earn 100K in the year, that over 12 months, it would be better if you were like, I'm going to earn, I don't know, 2 to 5K per month, or I'm going to aim to gain 1 new client each week, or I'm going to reach out to 5 new clients every Monday, and just have that for the goal for the next 12 months. I just keep all my goals really small, and I know that I can reach them, and I know they're not too difficult to do, and those small tiny wins, one, make me feel really good when I accomplish them, and they're continuous, and by the end of the year they've actually compounded and I've done a lot of big things. Because every time you check something small off your list and give yourself a small win, you're going to get those good feel chemicals that are going to keep you motivated. And it's way better than waiting months or years to celebrate one huge win. And like I do have my huge big future goal, and that's in the distance, but it's more like my vision for where I want to go. But I have tiny small wins each week and each month, and to keep me moving forward to the end of the year. And I know you've probably heard this before, you really have to love yourself and show gratitude to yourself for the things that you have accomplished. Because the truth is, your brain has this annoying habit of moving the goalpost every time you succeed. So just take a moment to have a look at where you were and where you are now, and recognize all the work that you've put into what you're doing, and give yourself, I know it sounds crazy, a little bit of love, a little bit of pat on the back, because you've done this on your own, and you really are, as a self-employed person, someone freelancing, in a difficult position. But you do have the abilities and the resilience and the strength to move yourself forward. It's just being aware of how your brain works and realize it's not all down to you, and that actually the emotions that you're feeling is generally because of the situation that you're putting your brain through. So instead of immediately jumping into the next thing that you've got to fix, the next goal you've got to accomplish, just take a moment to appreciate yourself and where you are now and where you've come from and the things that you've already done. I'm giving you a high five. Look, being self-employed or being a freelancer, having your small business, it's not about choosing freedom over security. It's way more complex than that and way more messier. It's because you've chosen a really hard path, and your brain's not built for the path that you've chosen. It's built for groups, it's built for teams, it's built for structure, routine, hierarchy. It's not built for you going alone and having to take on a million different decisions on your own. So salute yourself for how far you've come, because you've chosen a difficult path to go down. So the best thing you can do for yourself is understand why it could be difficult and how to use the systems I've given you to make things a little bit more easier for yourself. And what I learned from being self-employed for 25 years is that real freedom doesn't come from the lack of routine and structure. It's there because you've set out your day, and I don't have to think about anything else apart from my non-negotiables that I know are going to move me forward in my business where I want to go. Like sitting down at 11 a.m. this morning and still being sat here at 5 p.m. filming these videos. And I know at 6:30, my partner's going to come in and I'm going to start cooking dinner. And I know at 7:30, we're going to sit down and maybe watch a movie, unless I have to get a deadline done. I know at 8:30 what I'm doing, and I know at 9:30 I'm going to bed. I know it sounds boring, but it makes my brain and my life so much less stressful. So once you get that figured out, that you need the structure and routine, and you start planning that in your daily life, the whole self-employment journey just becomes a little bit easier. What I would love you to do today is pick one of the systems, be that validation by finding groups, be that organizing and planning your time and your structure the day before and putting those certain timescales in your calendar, or planning out small, tiny goals throughout your day that you can actually win. And let me know how that went, how that felt for you, and did it make any changes? And if this video helps you at all understand why you might be struggling, why the path might feel difficult at times, then please do me the favor of subscribing and clicking that bell or giving me a thumbs up. And so that lets me help other freelancers and other people who are self-employed who might be struggling, who also might to hear this too. And if you're interested in tiny wins, I'm going to talk about that more in my next video, where I'm going to discuss how those small, tiny wins compound into those bigger wins. And before you know it, they've moved you forward in your business exponentially. So you can go from 5 years of doing nothing to 5 years of having a momentous change in your business. And the research behind this will completely change how you think about progress and how you start moving forward. But until then, remember that the real freedom in being someone who is self-employed, who is freelancing, who is on this journey alone, doesn't come from the lack of structure. It comes from being smart enough to create the right amount of structure and routine in your life and in your business that supports you physically and mentally and propels you forward. And keep thriving, and thanks for watching.